The sea is never silent. Its voice rises in whispers, in sighs, in endless stories carried by the tide. Long before empires, the waves already told secrets to the wind. Among those secrets was one greater than kings and crowns. It spoke of a relic born not of steel, but of ocean itself. A gift of balance, a promise of eternity, shaped as a trident. They called it the Trident Eternal of Poseidon, not forged for battle, nor meant for conquest or pride. It was a key to harmony, a bridge between land and sea. Its three shining prongs held the rhythm of the world: creation, motion, renewal. The sailors of old swore they heard it humming beneath the waves. Fishermen swore their nets glowed when the relic was near. Poets wrote of its light piercing the blackest storms. Yet no hand ever claimed it. No mortal truly saw it. It lived in legend, resting beyond reach, hidden in the deep. Some said it sleeps, waiting for a heart that can listen. Not to command, not to rule, but to understand. Tonight, we sail into that story. Tonight, we follow the whispers of Poseidon's eternal sea. The sea remembers what men forget. Its voice has carried through centuries, telling tales of wonders unseen. Among those tales lies the story of the whispering waves. Sailors spoke of them with hushed tones, as if the waves could hear. Each crest carried a secret, each tide a hidden truth. And within their whispers, a relic shimmered in legend: the Trident Eternal of Poseidon. It was not a tool of war, nor a weapon of destruction. It was the song of the ocean, given shape. They said it could calm storms with a single breath. They said it could summon rain where land was thirsty. They said it could open safe paths across the fiercest seas. Yet the trident was never seen resting in mortal hands. It remained a mystery, a promise carved into the tides. Old fishermen claimed the waves hummed when it was near. They told of nights when nets filled with silverfish too swiftly. They told of waters glowing with blue light beneath their boats. Children listened wide-eyed, believing the sea itself was alive. And perhaps it truly was. For the trident was not just power, but harmony. 3 prongs, 3 truths, 3 eternal rhythms. Creation, motion, renewal. Creation, the birth of waves, the gift of new life in the deep. Motion, the dance of tides, the endless pull and return. Renewal, the healing of storms, the cleansing of shores. The sailors knew these rhythms well, though few named them. Each time the ocean gifted them a safe journey, they whispered thanks. Each time the wind shifted, they wondered if Poseidon was listening. But the whispers never gave clear answers. They were fragments, echoes, riddles woven into the foam. The waves seemed to sing at night, carrying voices not of men. Some heard laughter, some heard warnings, others heard prayers. It depended on the heart of the listener. A greedy soul heard promises of treasure below. A humble soul heard songs of peace and belonging. And so the trident became a mirror of those who sought it. Not all could endure its call. Many sailors chased the whispers, never to return. Some claimed the sea swallowed them whole. Others believed they had found a different shore beyond time. No tale was certain, only the waves remained. And still they whispered. Across ages, across kingdoms, across silence. Merchants carried the story from harbor to harbor. Poets wrote verses about a light beneath the water. Priests spoke of balance between gods and men. Even rulers feared the sea's hidden promise. For no crown could command the ocean's voice. It belonged only to Poseidon, and Poseidon chose to speak in riddles. The trident, they said, was hidden where no map could reach. Not buried in sand, not locked in caves, not chained by hands. It lived in the deep, beyond the grasp of mortals. But But when the world faltered, the whispers grew louder. They called not for kings, not for warriors, but for listeners. Listeners who could hear the difference between power and peace. Listeners who could sense the heart of the sea. That was the truth of the whispering waves. Not a myth, not a warning, but an invitation. An invitation to journey, to listen, to understand. For in the song of the waves lies a secret eternal, and those who dare to listen may find the trident waiting, not as a prize, but as a promise. A promise carved in water, eternal as the sea itself. Thus begins the tale of the whispering waves, and the journey toward Poseidon's eternal trident. The ocean is a cradle of beginnings. In its depths, silence carries the heartbeat of creation. There, where no sunlight reaches, Poseidon dreamed of balance. The world above was ruled by fire and thunder. The sky blazed with Zeus's lightning. The underworld echoed with Hades's quiet shadows. But the seas were wild, restless, unshaped. Waves clashed endlessly, torn between calm and storm. The god of the sea walked among them, listening. He felt the weight of every tide, every surge, every calm. And he knew the ocean needed a voice of its own. From that thought was born the Trident Eternal. It was not forged in a smith's fire. It was woven in the heart of a living ocean. Poseidon gathered the essence of three currents, one of birth, one of movement, one of renewal. He called upon the song of whales to guide creation. He called upon the pull of the moon to shape motion. He called upon the cleansing rains to breathe renewal. Three forces, three rhythms, three eternal truths. They flowed together, spiraling in endless harmony. And from that spiral, a shape emerged. A weapon not of war, but of balance. Its prongs gleamed with the light of eternal tides. The first prong sang of beginnings. It promised fertility, coral blooming, rivers flowing to sea. The second prong hummed with eternal movement. It was the dance of waves, the turning of seasons. The third prong glowed with renewal. It was the washing away of storms, the calm that followed chaos. When the three united, the sea was whole. Poseidon lifted the trident from the deep. The waters stilled, listening as if to a heartbeat. For the first time, the ocean found its rhythm. The storms bent their fury into music. The calm turned its silence into song. And the tides followed the pull of the trident's will. Not domination, but harmony. The sea learned to breathe with the world above. It rose with the moon and fell with the dawn. It carried ships with grace and swallowed storms with peace. The trident was no crown, no chain, no throne. It was a covenant between Poseidon and his realm. He swore never to wield it for conquest. He swore never to turn the ocean into a battlefield. Instead, he raised it as a promise of balance, a reminder that the sea could both nurture and protect. The gods witnessed its birth with wonder. Zeus nodded, thunder quiet in his hand. Hades bowed, shadows retreating in silence. Each knew the trident was no threat. It was an anchor of peace between realms. And so the three brothers made a pact. Their symbols of power would remain sacred. The thunderbolt, the helm, and the trident. Each a sign of duty, not domination. Each a bond between God and world. The Trident Eternal remained with Poseidon. He placed it deep within the ocean's heart, not to hide but to protect its purity. For the world above often forgets balance, and the world below often longs for it. The sea's voice carried the tale to mortal shores. Sailors felt its rhythm in the pull of tides. Poets dreamed of its light within the foam, and storytellers wove its birth into song. But none could claim it, for it was not theirs. It belonged only to the sea, eternal and untamed. And so the legend of the Trident grew. A tale of origin, a song of balance, a promise unbroken. The ocean held its secret close, humming softly, and the world above listened, never fully understanding. This was the birth of the Trident Eternal, a relic not of power, but of harmony everlasting. The sky burned with lightning, the earth rumbled with fire, the sea whispered its eternal song. 3 brothers ruled these realms, each bearing a symbol of divine promise. Zeus, Lord of Thunder, carried the bolt of storm and light. Hades, keeper of silence, wore the helm that veiled his presence from all eyes. And Poseidon, guardian of the waters, held the Trident Eternal, bright with ocean's heart. Their powers were vast, yet their duties heavier still. For the world was fragile, woven of threads that demanded balance. Zeus commanded the skies, but even he could not tame every storm. Hades ruled the underworld, yet he respected the cycles of life and death. Poseidon guided the seas, giving them rhythm, giving them breath. The 3 gathered in solemn council at the dawn of ages, high upon a mountain, low within a cavern, and deep beneath the sea. There they bound themselves with words not spoken, but sworn in silence. Each vowed never to wield their gifts for selfish gain. Each vowed to protect the harmony of gods and mortals alike. Zeus lifted his bolt and swore to guard justice. Hades lowered his helm and swore to guard truth. Poseidon raised his trident and swore to guard balance. Together, they sealed the pact of realms. The earth shook, the heavens roared, and the sea sighed in peace. It was said even the stars bore witness that night. And from then, the 3 emblems stood not as weapons, but as covenants. Mortals heard whispers of this pact in dreams and omens. Priests told stories of the brothers who chose restraint over conquest. Sailors spoke prayers to all 3 before setting out to sea. For each realm touched the other, and no one stood alone. The Trident Eternal shone brightest in this bond, not because it wielded power above all else, but because it echoed the balance that held them together. Its 3 prongs mirrored the 3 brothers themselves, one of creation, one of motion, one of renewal. They were not separate, but entwined in a single purpose: to guide, not to rule, to protect, not to destroy. Poseidon felt the weight of this oath deeply. The sea was vast, its moods unpredictable, its heart restless. Yet with the trident, he kept its rhythm steady. Not every wave was gentle, not every storm was kind. But within the chaos, there was order. And that order was his promise to his brothers. Zeus trusted Poseidon to guard this balance faithfully. Hades trusted him to honor the silence between tides. And Poseidon trusted them in return. This trust became the true strength of their pact. For without trust, power is nothing but shadow. Legends say the gods marked this covenant with signs. The thunder echoed less fiercely across seas that night. The underworld's gates glowed softly with peace, and the tides sang a lullaby that mortals heard in their sleep. Generations carried this song without knowing its source. Children dreamed of golden light dancing upon waves. Poets wrote of 3 brothers who held the world together. Even kings spoke humbly when storms broke at sea. For the trident reminded them all, balance is sacred. It could stir the seas into fury, yet it chose calm. It could sink cities, yet it chose renewal. It could command storms, yet it chose harmony. The pact of the gods was eternal, as long as trust remained. And so the trident was more than Poseidon's gift. It was a symbol of unity among realms divided, a silent vow carved into the heart of the ocean, a reminder that even gods must choose restraint. Mortals would forget, but the sea never did. Its waves carried the memory of that promise forever. Thus the Trident stood not alone, but as part of a greater whole, a covenant eternal, as endless as the tides themselves. The sea is never silent, even when the surface lies calm under the moon. Beneath its stillness, voices stir, weaving songs of ancient memory. These are the whispers of the deep, reaching for those who dare to listen. Long after the gods sealed their pact, mortals began to hear the sea speak. Not in words, but in rhythms, in echoes, in dreams carried by the tide. Sailors swore the waves called to them on nights of silver starlight. Fishermen claimed the currents nudged their boats toward hidden paths. Children dreamed of voices rising from shells held close to their ears. And everywhere, the whispers repeated the same mystery. The Trident Eternal was not lost, only waiting. Waiting for a time when balance would again be needed. It had sunk into the deep, not as treasure, but as covenant. Yet its presence lingered, humming through the veins of the ocean. The call was gentle, yet unyielding, like a tide that never ceased. Not all who heard it understood what it asked of them. Some chased it with greed, believing in riches or dominion. Others feared it, calling the whispers a curse of the drowned. But a few listened closely, and in listening, they learned. The call was not for conquest, but for harmony. It asked no man to rule, only to hear. It promised no crown, only the wisdom of balance. Legends say the first to heed the call were humble souls, a sailor who rescued a stranger from the sea, a shepherd who left an offering of milk by the shore, a poet who wrote verses of tides as guardians, not destroyers. These hearts felt the whispers not as riddles, but as guidance. They spoke of hearing songs in the waves like distant harps. They spoke of feeling the sea's pulse beating with their own. They spoke of dreams where a shining trident gleamed in the dark. The world above shifted as whispers grew louder. Storms came less fierce, yet stranger in their pattern. Winds guided ships safely one day, then hid their way the next. It was as though the sea tested those who lived upon it. Would they fear the change, or listen to its meaning? The wise knew the sea never moved without reason. For every storm carried cleansing, every calm carried warning. The whispers grew clearer with each passing age. In some harbors, they rose like songs sung by invisible choirs. In others, they rang like bells through caverns under the waves. Always the message remained the same. The trident endures. It was said those with pure intent could hear it strongest. Not kings, not conquerors, but wanderers, dreamers, listeners. Those who bent their ear to the shore found answers in the foam. Those who stood in silence on cliffs heard guidance in the winds. The sea chose its listeners carefully, for the trident was sacred. It did not wish to be wielded as a weapon of pride. It wished only to awaken in a hand that sought harmony. Thus the call of the deep was not a summons, but a test. Would mankind learn to hear without grasping? Would they learn to follow without conquering? Or would they chase shadows and vanish beneath the waves? The ocean never rushed its answer, for time was endless. It simply kept whispering, patient as stone, gentle as water. Its voice rose with the tides, faded with the moon, and returned again. Mortals came and went, but the call endured. It grew into prophecy, into story, into myth. Yet myths are not always false. They are truths wrapped in wonder. And in the heart of this wonder was a promise. The Trident Eternal still waits, resting in silence, bound to the sea. But its voice calls on, seeking ears that will understand. The call of the deep was never a command. It was an invitation to step closer, to listen, and to believe. For in the whispers of the ocean lies the path to eternity, and the trident, though unseen, still sings its song. The sea has always been a mirror for the soul. Those who look upon it see not only waves, but reflections of themselves. The Trident Eternal waited within this truth, hidden yet present. Its whispers reached hearts not through force, but through resonance. One such heart belonged to Callista, a daughter of the shore. She grew where the tide kissed the rocks and left shells as gifts. Her childhood was filled with salt on her lips and wind in her hair. She listened to gulls, to waves, and to the silence between storms. Unlike others, she did not fear the voices beneath the sea. At night, when the village slept, she wandered to the cliffs. There she pressed her ear to the wind and listened. The whispers came softly, like lullabies sung by unseen hands. She did not tell others, for she knew they would laugh. They called her a dreamer, a girl with her head in the clouds. But Callista knew the whispers were real as the tide. One evening, as the moon painted silver on the water, she heard more. The sea called her name, not in sound, but in meaning. It invited her, not with promise of power, but with belonging.
We must reach the shore.
The next day, she followed the shoreline farther than ever before, past coves where fishermen dared not sail, past rocks carved by time into shapes of sleeping giants. The waters shimmered with a strange glow as she walked. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from recognition. For the first time, she felt she was not wandering. She was being guided. Callista found a cave where the tide whispered louder. Inside, the air pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and deep. Shadows danced on walls carved by waves older than memory. And there, in the center, lay a pool as still as glass. She knelt, gazing at her reflection. But the reflection shifted, and another image appeared. A trident gleaming faintly, resting in the embrace of the sea. It was not solid, but light-shaped as form. It pulsed with warmth, like a beacon of harmony. She reached out, but her hand touched only water. The image rippled, yet the glow remained. Then came the voice, not outside, but within her heart. Not yet. You must learn. The words echoed without sound, a meaning carried in silence. Callista trembled, yet felt no fear. The trident was real, alive, waiting, but not ready to rise. It sought not hands, but hearts prepared to listen fully. From that day, she carried the whispers like a secret flame. She spoke with the sea each dawn, each dusk, each storm. She learned its moods, its rhythms, its patience. Her life became a conversation with waves that never ceased. Seasons passed, and her gift grew. She could read the sky as easily as letters on a page. She could sense when fish would return, when storms would sleep. Her village began to notice, though they did not understand. They called it luck, or perhaps blessing, but not destiny. Callista smiled, knowing the truth was deeper than words. The sea had chosen her as listener, as witness, as keeper. Not yet wielder, but student of its eternal wisdom. And she accepted, with humility, that her journey had only begun. For the Trident Eternal was not a prize to be won. It was a bond to be honored, a truth to be lived. She knew now that the whispers were not myth. They were a promise, unfolding in her life, one tide at a time. And somewhere in the deep, Poseidon's relic stirred, waiting for the moment when its light would rise again. But until then, Callista walked with the sea, and the sea walked with her. The ocean teaches slowly, with patience deeper than mountains and time older than stone. Callista's days became woven with lessons written in tide and wind. At dawn, she studied the colors of the sky reflected upon the waves. At dusk, she listened for patterns in the rhythm of retreating foam. She learned that no wave rose without reason, no current flowed without meaning. The sea was not chaos, but a living order older than men remembered. Each breeze, each ripple, each stillness carried a message. And she began to translate those messages into understanding. One morning, she walked along the shore and saw dolphins leaping in arcs. Their play was not only joy, but guidance, pointing toward unseen waters. She followed their movement, and there she found fish returning in plenty. Her people rejoiced, calling it chance, but she knew it was the sea's gift. On another day, clouds gathered heavy and low above the horizon. The air smelled of iron, and the gulls vanished from the cliffs. She warned the village to stay ashore, for the sea whispered of unrest. Hours later, the storm came, fierce but passing without loss of life. Her people whispered now too, though not of waves, but of Callista. They wondered if she carried secrets, if she was touched by the gods. But she told them nothing, for the truth was not hers to give. The sea had not chosen her as prophet, but as listener. Its wisdom was not for command, but for harmony and care. Still, she felt the whispers grow stronger each passing season. The cave where she had first seen the trident called to her often. When she returned, the pool shimmered with light beneath its surface. The reflection of the trident glowed brighter, though still untouchable. Again the voice stirred, steady as a heartbeat beneath the waves. Patience, child. You are not yet ready. The words did not wound her, but guided her as gently as a tide. She knew readiness was not about strength, but about balance. To hear the sea was not to control, but to align with its rhythm. She began to share her harmony in quiet ways with her people. She taught children to sit by the water and listen to its voice. She taught fishers to read stars, not as maps, but as conversations. She taught elders that storms were not curses, but cleansing. In this way, she became a bridge without naming herself as one. Her heart grew steady, like an anchor grounded in shifting sands. She no longer wondered why the sea chose her, only how to honor it. Then came a night when the stars burned brighter than fire. The tide rose higher, yet the air was calm as a breath held still. Callista felt the call stronger than ever before, filling her veins with light. She walked to the cave, guided not by choice, but by destiny. Inside, the pool no longer held only reflection, but radiance. The trident's image pulsed with waves of shimmering silver and blue. She knelt, heart open, hands resting on stone, eyes unblinking. And the voice came again, clear as wind, deep as eternity. You are learning, but the journey is long. The sea waits still. The glow faded, but Callista did not despair, for she understood. The Trident Eternal was not rushing her, it was shaping her. And she left the cave with calm resolve, knowing one truth above all. The sea would speak until she was ready, and she would listen until eternity. The sea carried its wisdom across generations, whispering where ears would listen. Callista had grown with its rhythm, her heart steady as the tide. But the world beyond her village shifted, restless in ways she could not ignore. Merchants came from distant shores, bringing tales of rising kingdoms. They spoke of rulers hungry for dominion, and seas treated as obstacles, not partners. Ships multiplied, sails crowding horizons once left open to the gulls. Fishermen cast nets deeper, greedier, pulling more than the sea could renew. And the whispers turned heavy, tinged with sorrow instead of song. Callista heard it in the waves, in storms that lingered too long. She knew the balance wavered as the sea called more urgently. The Trident Eternal stirred not for glory, but for necessity. It was not a weapon, but a reminder of harmony forgotten. One evening, as twilight draped the coast, Callista met a traveler. He was a wanderer, a sailor with eyes weathered by distant storms. His name was Dorian, and he carried maps inked with foreign tides. He spoke of seas where whales no longer sang, where coral turned pale. He had searched for answers, following whispers of relics and myths. When he saw Callista listening to the waves, he did not laugh. He asked instead, "What do they tell you?" And for the first time, Callista shared her truth with another. She spoke of the cave, of the glowing reflection, of the Trident's call. Dorian listened, not with skepticism, but with reverence. "I have heard it too," he said, voice low as the surf. "In dreams, in storms, in the silence between waves, I have felt its pull." Together, they walked the shoreline, speaking not of power, but of balance. Callista realized the sea did not call only one, but many. Different hearts across the world heard its whispers in their own way. The Trident Eternal did not belong to her alone. It belonged to harmony. That night, the tide rose higher than she had ever seen. The cave called, its pulse stronger, brighter, like a beacon. Callista entered with Dorian beside her, the glow bathing their faces. The Trident's image shimmered, prongs gleaming with silver fire. The voice came again, deeper, echoing in both their hearts. Two listeners, two paths, one sea. They felt the meaning more than the words. The Trident did not divide. It united weaving souls who shared its purpose into one song. Dorian knelt, humbled, his eyes shining with awe. Callista bowed her head, not as servant, but as student. The glow surged, then softened, retreating like a tide at dawn. The voice whispered, "Not yet, but soon." They left the cave in silence, the night filled with starlight and promise. For the first time, Callista felt less alone in her calling. The burden was no longer hers alone to carry. The sea was weaving its listeners together, a tide of kindred spirits. She understood then that the Trident's awakening would not be for one. It would be for all who listened, all who chose harmony over conquest. And so she walked with renewed strength, her steps steady beside Dorian's. The whispers had become louder, clearer, a chorus instead of a single voice. The sea was preparing, and so were they. And somewhere in the deep, Poseidon's relic shimmered brighter, waiting for its time. The sea has a way of binding strangers, weaving their fates with threads of tide and wind. Callista and Dorian walked the shores as companions, guided by whispers. Their bond deepened not in words of ambition, but in silence shared. They listened together, letting the sea's rhythm guide their steps. At times they argued. He saw maps, she saw meanings. Yet the ocean softened their differences, reminding them both of purpose. For the Trident's call was not for mastery, but for unity. Dorian spoke often of distant waters where storms never ceased. He told of islands sinking, of harbors where fish had vanished. He had seen seas wounded by greed, and he carried sorrow within. Callista listened, feeling the sea echo his grief with waves of lament. "The balance is broken," Dorian said, gazing at the horizon. "And it will not mend unless the Trident rises again." But Callista shook her head, her voice steady as the tide. "The Trident rises not for demand, but for readiness." Together, They returned often to the cave, where light shimmered. Each time, the trident's glow greeted them with patient radiance. Never closer, never farther,
Reach the shore.
always waiting like a heartbeat. One night, when the moon was swallowed by shadow, they returned again. The cave pulsed brighter than ever, waves humming with energy. The trident's reflection rippled, prongs sharp as lightning in the dark. This time, the voice came not as whisper, but as chorus. Two are called. Two must learn. The sea is not yours. It is itself. Callista felt the words like warmth in her chest. Dorian felt them like a tide, washing away fear. They understood the lesson. The trident did not belong to them. They belonged to it, as listeners belong to the song. From then on, they sought to live not as seekers, but as stewards. They taught the village to fish with care, not with greed. They warned travelers to respect storms as teachers, not foes. And slowly, harmony returned, though fragile as glass on the waves. Still, whispers told them balance was not yet restored. The world beyond their shore was restless, blind to the sea's plea. Empires grew hungrier, ships stretched farther, storms grew louder. One morning, Dorian unfolded a map inked with distant stars. "There are others," he said, "others who hear as we do." Callista looked to the horizon, her heart both heavy and hopeful. The sea's whispers agreed, tugging her spirit outward across the waves. The Trident Eternal was not a treasure bound to one shore. It was a song carried on every tide, waiting to be heard. And so they prepared to leave, guided not by ambition, but by duty. The village wept, yet blessed them, knowing the sea had called. Callista stood on the cliffs one last time, listening to the surf. The waves whispered farewell, but also promise. Return when the time is right. With sails unfurled, their journey began across the open water. Days turned to nights, nights to days, and the sea spoke constantly. Sometimes in calm so still it mirrored the stars like glass. Sometimes in storms that roared but never broke their resolve. Each lesson deepened their bond, each tide drew them closer to purpose. For they were no longer wanderers, but bearers of a calling. The Trident Eternal waited, not in one place, but in every heart that listened. And the sea carried them onward, steady as destiny itself. The horizon opened wide as their ship moved beyond the sight of familiar shores. Winds carried scents of lands unknown, each breeze telling stories of distant lives. Callista stood at the bow, her eyes tracing the restless line of waves. Dorian worked with the ropes, steady hands guiding sails like wings of a bird. Nights brought stars that neither had seen before, constellations strange yet inviting. They learned to read the skies, mapping their course by shimmering fires above. The sea spoke in its endless dialect, soft hums, deep growls, playful splashes. Each sound was a reminder that they traveled not through emptiness, but through presence. One dawn, a flock of silver birds circled the ship and vanished into mist. Callista whispered, "The sea shows us signs. We must learn their meanings." Dorian nodded, though doubt flickered like shadow across his eyes. On the seventh night, a storm rose suddenly, fierce but not cruel. Waves lifted the vessel high, then cradled it gently back down. The storm's rhythm felt more like a lesson than a threat. As thunder rolled, Callista closed her eyes and listened deeply. She heard words hidden in the roar. "Endure together, and you will endure at all." When dawn came, calm seas returned, clear as crystal glass. Both felt changed, as if the storm had carved strength into their spirits. Days turned into weeks, and they found islands scattered like jewels. Some islands welcomed them with lush forests and singing streams. Others were barren, nothing but rocks carved by salt and wind. On one isle, they met fishermen who spoke of strange omens. "The sea grows restless," said an elder, eyes clouded with fear. "Creatures vanish, tides shift, storms arrive without warning." Callista listened, sensing truth in his trembling voice. Dorian studied his maps, noting patterns of chaos spreading outward. It was no longer only their village in danger. It was the world entire. They stayed to help the islanders, teaching respect for balance. Callista showed children how to thank the sea before casting nets. Dorian repaired boats, urging sailors to sail with care, not conquest. The villagers gifted them food, blessings, and shells carved with symbols of hope. Yet even with gratitude, Callista felt a shadow of urgency growing. The Trident Eternal was not only waiting, it was calling louder. Back at sea, dolphins joined their ship, leaping as though guiding them. Callista laughed, feeling the dolphins carried joy from the ocean's heart. Dorian, more solemn, wondered if even the creatures sought refuge in their voyage. At night, Callista dreamed of the trident glowing brighter than before. It hovered above endless waters, its light spreading across the globe. She awoke breathless, the vision echoing in her soul like thunder. Dorian, too, confessed to dreams, though his were filled with storms. He saw ships sinking, rulers arguing, kingdoms deaf to the sea's voice. Together, they pieced the meaning. The world teetered on the edge of imbalance. The Trident's song was no longer just whisper or chorus. It was plea. One evening, as the sun bled gold into the horizon, they sat in silence. The sea lay calm, holding secrets beneath its shining skin. Callista reached for Dorian's hand, her voice steady but soft. "We cannot wait for others to listen. We must carry the song ourselves." Dorian squeezed her hand, the fire in his heart matching her resolve. Their journey was no longer search alone, but mission shared. For beyond every tide, every storm, and every shore, the Trident awaited. Not as a prize to claim, but as a truth to live. And together, they sailed on, hearts bound by purpose, guided by whispers eternal. The sea stretched endlessly, yet each wave seemed to whisper the same message. Onward. Callista awoke to dawn light, spilling across the deck like molten gold. Dorian already stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the horizon with quiet resolve. They had sailed far, yet both knew their journey was only beginning. The ocean had taught them patience, but also urgency in equal measure. One morning, a strange current seized the ship, pulling them sideways. The waters shimmered silver, as though lit from beneath by hidden stars. Callista leaned over the rail, her breath caught by the shimmering sight. Fish with scales of glass swam in spirals, forming patterns like constellations. Dorian murmured, "This sea is alive with symbols. We are meant to read them." The fish formed a circle, then scattered, leaving only silence. It was a reminder. Unity is strength. Division brings silence. That night, they anchored near a chain of tiny islets. The villagers greeted them with lanterns glowing like fireflies on the shore. Their leader, a woman with hair streaked silver as moonlight, welcomed them. She spoke of dreams that haunted her people for generations. "A trident of light rises above the sea," she said. "It calls for guardians, yet none have answered. Until now." Callista and Dorian exchanged a glance, heavy with recognition. The sea was spreading the same vision to all who would listen. That night, the villagers gathered around fires, singing songs of tides. Their voices rose in harmony, echoing the rhythm of waves. Callista joined in, feeling the song as if it were her own. Dorian, though quieter, kept his eyes on the stars above. He traced their patterns, realizing the constellations aligned with the villagers' song. The sea was mapping itself not in water, but in voices. Before leaving, the woman gifted them a carved shell, etched with spirals. "Keep this," she said. "It will remind you that harmony is stronger than fear." With blessings and supplies, they sailed once more into open water. Days grew longer, winds more restless, and storms more frequent. The ocean seemed to test them, waves rising higher, winds sharper. But they did not falter, for each storm carried hidden wisdom. One storm drove them toward a vast whirlpool glowing faintly. The ship trembled, yet the sea seemed to pull them gently inward. At the center, the water was calm, glowing with deep azure light. Callista felt the whispers vibrate through her bones, clearer than ever before. The Trident is not distant. It is within all who listen. Dorian touched the water, and the light spread like ripples of fire. Visions rose before them, cities built upon waves, creatures of legend swimming free, but also visions of greed, ships plundering, storms raging in protest. It was a warning. The sea could heal or destroy, depending on balance. When the vision faded, they found themselves drifting into calmer waters. Both stood in silence, their hearts heavy with new responsibility. The journey was no longer about finding the Trident alone. It was about carrying its truth, even into places that would resist it. One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the sea in crimson fire. Callista whispered, "Do you think we are enough for what lies ahead?" Dorian placed a hand on hers, steady as the helm. "We are not enough alone, but we are never alone with the sea." The horizon beckoned, glowing faintly with a light beyond the sun. And so, with sails taut and hearts steady, they pressed onward. The Trident Eternal awaited, not as an end, but as a beginning. The journey of Callista and Dorian reached its final horizon, though the sea stretched endless before them. They had crossed storms and silence, met strangers and friends, and carried the whispers of the ocean within. The Trident Eternal was never a weapon, nor a crown. It was a truth meant to be lived. One dawn, the sea grew so calm, it seemed to hold its breath in sacred stillness. The air shimmered with light, and the waves reflected more than the sky. They reflected memory. Callista and Dorian stood at the bow, hearts steady, eyes wide with reverence. From the depths rose a glow, brighter and purer than any sunlit tide. The Trident appeared, not as object, but as living light shaped by harmony. Its radiance wrapped the vessel, warming wood, sails, and soul alike. A voice filled the air, layered with centuries of tides, storms, and whispers. "You have listened. You have learned. The sea does not yield to one, but to all." Callista bowed her head, feeling the weight of humility, not ownership. Dorian whispered, "It was never ours to claim, only to carry." The light shimmered, then divided, scattering into countless sparks across the ocean. Each spark sank into waves, into winds, into creatures, into distant shores. The Trident Eternal had returned to its true form, everywhere, within all who listen. Callista felt tears on her cheeks, though they tasted like salt of the sea. Dorian exhaled slowly, shoulders lighter, yet heart stronger than ever before. The ship glided forward as though guided by invisible hands of the tide. They no longer searched for the Trident, for it now lived within them. Their task was no longer to find, but to teach, to remind, to protect. The sea whispered, "Guard the balance, share the song." be stewards, not rulers. And so their voyage continued, not ending, but flowing into eternity. They returned to villages where storms had once broken, homes and spirits. They taught children to sing before fishing, to honor the ocean's gifts. They taught sailors to read the tides not as obstacles, but as guidance. And slowly, shore by shore, the world began to remember harmony. Not all listened, not all understood, but the whispers grew louder still. Because the Trident Eternal was no longer hidden, it was carried in hearts. Years passed, and Callista grew wise, her hair touched with silver spray. Dorian's voice deepened like the sea itself, calm yet powerful. Together, they became legends, though they never sought such names. They called themselves only keepers of a truth older than time. When Callista stood again on the cliffs of her first home, she smiled. The sea sang not of longing now, but of fulfillment, of eternal presence. Dorian joined her, their hands clasped, their hearts still listening as one. They knew their lives were but brief vessels in the ocean's vast eternity. But they had done what was asked. They had listened, they had carried, they had shared. And as the tide rolled in, it whispered not of endings, but of beginnings. The Trident Eternal did not vanish with them, nor end with their story. It lived in every wave, in every wind, in every heart that hears the sea. And so, dear listener, the tale of Poseidon's eternal trident is not past. It is present, flowing now around you, waiting for you to listen. For the sea does not belong to us, nor we to it. We belong together. And in that belonging, the Trident Eternal shines, forever and always.